Good morning and welcome to the Sports Card. I'm your host, Tad Kosneski, the show that takes a look at high school, college, and pro sports around the South Jersey and Delaware Valley area. Tonight we have a show geared towards the high school fans here in our South Jersey Cablevision viewing area. I have the director of the NJSIAA, Boyd Sands, is with us today. Welcome to the show, Mr. Sands.
It's nice to be here, and it's nice to be back at Franklin Township.
That's right. In case you didn't know, at one time you were the superintendent at Delsey High School.
For 20 years, I was the superintendent at Delsey.
And then you moved from the superintendent to becoming the director of the NJSIAA.
Yes.
What is the NJSIAA?
Okay, the NJSIAA is the New Jersey State Interscholastic Athletic Association. And we're made up of the 440 public, private, and independent schools in New Jersey. Each school joins our association as a member. They have to approve. For example, at Delsey, every year we had a resolution drawn to join the NJSIAA as a member of the association.
Now, how is the organization funded?
Yeah, that's a good question. Many people only think of the NJSIAA relative to finances when they're paying an admission fee to come into a game or a tournament match. Really, our budget is funded 70% through entry fees. When I say entry, admissions into events. Each school pays $850 dues, and our dues haven't increased in the past 5 years, even though our programs have dramatically increased. Perhaps that's the biggest difference I've found in moving from the role of a superintendent of schools to the executive director, where now when I'm looking at the budget, I am looking at number of admissions because that is 70% of our budget. Which is a lot different than a school district budget where the voters vote, the township committee may act, but ultimately you know what your bottom line is. Situations as weather this past this winter, when we're dealing with very negative kind of weather, we're very thankful that we're not having any events during that period of time.
Now, getting back to exactly what you guys do, we understand where the money comes from. My impression is you guys are the ones that set the rules for the way the game is played.
We set the rules for New Jersey schools, but very frankly, the rules per sport, and we have 32 different programs at NJSIAA. They come from the National High School Federation, which is located in Kansas City. Every state in the nation belongs to the National High School Federation, and we're all basically using their rules. We have representatives that serve on committees. For example, one of the wrestling officials in the state of New Jersey represents the entire East on the wrestling committee of the National Federation.
Are there any major changes nationally that you can think of in any sport, just to give us an example that New Jersey may be a little bit different than the national rules?
Not really. I just earlier in the winter attended the National Federation's football committee, and there were not many rules relative to football that were being discussed that would have a big effect on the programs in New Jersey. If anything, New Jersey coaches appear to be a little ahead of the game, and New Jersey school administrators, we recognize, are usually well ahead of the game.
When you took this job, when you left Delsey, what were some of your goals? What did you hope to accomplish?
Well, New Jersey is very fortunate with the history of NJSIAA, especially with my predecessor who moved from New Jersey to become head of the National Federation, Bob Canopy. We offer more championship programs in New Jersey than any other state. We have more programs for female participants than any other state. So part of my job, I recognized at the outset, was to make sure we maintain our top ranking in the nation as a state association, and that's something that we're all striving to accomplish.
Do you happen to know the numbers, not the specific numbers, but what is the biggest participated sports, maybe the top 3 or 4 for girls
Well,
and
your
boys?
top sports in regard to participation, football, soccer, both male and female, basketball, of course, baseball and softball. Indoor track is significant in some areas. It's significant in New Jersey, but outdoor track and cross country are very significant across the nation.
Have there been any surprises for you when you've taken over the job, some things that you're like, boy, I never thought this, or I never thought that, anything that just kind of caught you funny, if you will?
Not really, and I say that because I've been long associated with NJSIAA. I served on the executive committee. I was on the executive committee of the National Federation. I officiated for many years, as you know, in New Jersey. So I had a working knowledge of the association. It's very interesting to me the number of programs we have and the involvement and the good people that are associated with interscholastic athletics throughout the state. I knew it happened at Delsey and in the South Jersey area, and it's just nice to see that there are extremely fine people working with the student athletes across the state.
All right, we're going to take a short break here on the Sports Card. I'll be back with my guest, Boyd Sands, the director of the NJSIAA, right after this. Welcome back to the Sports Card. I'm your host, Tad Kozaneski. This week's guest, the director of the NJSIAA, Boyd Sands. Mr. Sands, is there any differences between North Jersey high schools and South Jersey high schools?
Really, there are not too many differences. Probably the biggest difference is time and distance between schools. That's something that, for example, in the Tri-County area, we're traveling, or I'm saying we, I still act like I'm in the Tri-County league. But for Delsey to travel to Woodstown or Pennsville or Carneys Point, 25, 30 miles. Well, in some cases in North Jersey, you're going to travel through 3 conferences in that kind of a trip. So it's much closer. But then many of the facilities in North Jersey schools are handicapped because they just do not have the open space that South Jersey schools have. And we found this especially with the javelin, where unfortunately 2 years ago a young girl was hit with a javelin. And we defined very specific guidelines, rules, and regulations. Well, in that case, what worked in the south and central and northwestern part of the state really didn't work too well in Bergen County or Essex County.
If you have a problem with the school, without being too specific, what does the NJSIAA do? Like you said, a field dimensions for the javelin. You come in and you say either fix it or the program's done, or how does that work?
Generally, problems for schools are one of two kinds. One that is worked out through the conference, or one that is directed immediately to us. Some of the problems that could be directed immediately to us would be eligibility kind of problems for student athletes. We deal a great deal in that. Problems that might be referred to a conference or a league would relate to scheduling and timing of an event and so forth.
Something there was a little bit of a problem, I guess, in football season that just popped into my head was with the mainland student this year. How upsetting was that to you? Because there's a strict policy, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, if you get kicked out of a football game, you're out the next football game. And the way it read in the newspapers was the gentleman went to a judge down in his area. The judge then kind of overruled your decision. That's got to be really upsetting for you as an organization.
Not really. I think if you're in administration long enough, or you're involved with sports long enough, you learn to deal with the situation and move on. And very frankly, that's what we're dealing with mainland. Unfortunately, we ran into a judge who assumed jurisdiction over the matter, where really it should have been in the hands of the Commissioner of Education. At this point today, the case is back in the hands of the Commissioner of Education, where we felt it originally should have been, and we're awaiting a decision through his office.
In Philadelphia right now, they're having a lot of cutbacks on a lot of their activities. Is there any threat of any of that maybe creeping into New Jersey with the budgets and the money?
Very much so. If you ask what is the major concern we have at NJSIAA and our executive committee, in fact, I should mention our executive committee, made up of 48 members, superintendents, principals, athletic directors, school board members from throughout the state. Their prime concern at this point is that in some areas, interscholastic sports are not being recognized for the quality programs that they have and all the benefits that young people derive from participating in interscholastic athletics. We certainly feel that all athletes are better citizens, and the programs are cost effective. If anyone looked at a local school budget It's anywhere from 1 to 3% that take up the whole activities program.
Okay.
And if we're going to look at interscholastic athletics, we feel that we have to put our best foot forward, not only for those programs, but for student councils, for band, for forensics, for dramatics. All of these programs are vital components of secondary schools today.
Are there any myths that you hear about that you could clear up for us right now?
Probably the biggest myth that we hear is the term "the state." Many times it's indicated the state, meaning NJSIAA did this or NJSIAA did that, and usually in a negative connotation. Really, the state are all the schools put together. All of the rules that we're involved with come from the schools.
Okay.
They propose them, they vote on them, and each year we have an annual meeting. If anyone wants to change a rule or regulation, it's voted on by the principals of all 440 schools. So really, the state isn't one entity. The state is all the schools that make up our association. And when we're enforcing rules, we're only enforcing the rules that the schools approve themselves.
So you're the traffic cop, more or less, the legislative make the law and you just enforce them.
And in many cases, explaining rules and regulations to individuals who are not acquainted with them.
All right, we're going to take a short break here on the Sports Card. We'll be back with more with the director of the NJSIAA, Boyd Sands, in a moment. Welcome back to the Sports Card. I'm your host, Tad Kozaneski. This week's guest, Boyd Sands, the director of the NJSIAA. Well, we start off with the fall season. You have football season, and something that was new this year was traveling up the Meadowlands for some teams in South Jersey. How do you think that came out this year?
With mixed feelings. There was some concern over the fact that South Jersey teams had to travel up to the Meadowlands. One of the concerns that we had was, how do you determine who plays in the Meadowlands, or how do you determine who plays on an all-weather, neutral kind of a field? And it was indicated by our football committee, which is made up of representatives from across the state, primarily coaches, that we'd use the PowerPoint system to determine who played in the Meadowlands. It's interesting to note that probably the costs of schools in South Jersey weren't that much more if they had to play a South Jersey team, and we say along the shore, Brick Township, Toms River, if they had to travel to those locations, wouldn't have been very much more in regard to transportation than playing up the Meadowlands. If you play at the Meadowlands, there's also the false assumption that you have to wear special shoes.
Yeah, I heard a lot about that.
You don't have to wear special shoes. I've seen the grounds people up there playing touch football during their lunch break with regular athletic shoes, and we tell the schools you don't need specialized shoes to play there. Regular athletic footwear will do fine, and it has. We've seen teams come in with it. They haven't experienced any problems at all.
Will we ever see a day possibly instead of the Meadowlands for South Jersey teams, a site like Glassboro State College or some site around here, or will it always be the Meadowlands? South
Jersey has a problem. South Jersey has a problem that when we get to that time of the year, schools, and very understandably so, throughout the state, not just South Jersey, they don't want to give up their field, their natural turf field, their grass field, for two other schools to come in and tear up. Okay. And it could be torn up in that kind of a situation. And the closest field to the South Jersey schools is Trenton State College. And we're talking to Trenton State to try and get them to change their mind and open it up a little to football. Cost-wise, expense-wise, I don't know how much more it is to go to the Meadowlands and Trenton State. But we have public high schools in the northern part of the state that have all-weather kind of fields.
Wow.
Where many events take place on those fields, and we're looking to perhaps use them for maybe the Group 1, Group 2, some of the parochial games in the future. But we just, in South Jersey here, do not have any all-weather fields, so that's out.
On a quick side note, we here at South Jersey Cablevision went up and followed Shalleck playing soccer at Trenton State, and the closeness of Trenton State and just the atmosphere, I thought that was a big success for soccer.
Trenton State College is extremely cooperative with our association. We have many events at Trenton State. Their all-weather field is a natural for soccer, for field hockey. We use their pool. It's just a great location, and they're good people to work with.
Getting back to football quickly, we had talked to Coach Oberg last week on our show about maybe a team like Delsey, who plays in the Tri-County Conference, is kind of handicapped when it comes to playoffs and power points because they play a lot of Group 1 teams. Are there any thoughts in the future of maybe expanding the playoffs or adding an extra week to the regular season to help accommodate teams like that?
Here again, this would be up to the vote of the member schools. And very frankly, I haven't heard a great deal about lengthening the season. I have a personal feeling on that. If you're going to lengthen the season, it should be lengthened into the summer months. Okay. New Jersey is the latest state in the nation by 2 weeks in opening up the football season. We feel that there would be definite problems, and you mentioned Woodrow Wilson. Anyone who was at that game, the weather conditions are just not conducive to the game if we continue to hold the games at that time of the year.
Now, do teams across the nation, for the most part, play the same amount of weeks as we do here in South Jersey?
Yeah, they play more games, okay. But they open up earlier. And at times we're asked the question of how come Florida, Alabama, all the southern states are opening earlier where it's much warmer than it is in New Jersey. And our response is the member schools in New Jersey want 9 games, want the season basically to start at September 1st and basically to be over in time for the start of the winter season.
So there's a possibility, if the member schools all got together, that they could expand the schedule a little bit within reason?
And usually, as in any organization, you sort of get wind of movements like that, and we haven't heard any.
Finally, before we leave football, a great new rule that I really liked as the cable company, overtime. How did that come out for you this year?
Great, and it's a good example of how much we rely on the coaches in the state. The football coaches in the state made that request through our football committee, and it worked out extremely well. And we really haven't heard any negative comments. I read one negative article where a reporter interviewed 3 coaches who happened to lose in overtime. But that's the only negative I've heard all year. So it definitely was a positive, and it was a step forward. And very frankly, other states are looking at New Jersey on how we did it, starting at the 25. The whole process that was implemented in New Jersey has worked very well.
What we're going to do is take a short break. We'll bring it back with more on football and transfer it into basketball season. We're with the director of the NJSIAA, Boyd Sands. We'll be back with more in a moment. Welcome back to the Sports Card. Tad Kozaneski, along with this week's guest, Boyd Sands, the director of the NJSIAA. During football season, we hit the playoff times, and I hear parents and fans all the time, what's this fee? What's this all about? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Okay, that goes back to the revenue source. The prime revenue source of the association is from gate receipts at our championship contest. We're paying $5 to get into a championship football game. We have to relate that to when is the last time someone paid $5 to go to the movies. Mm-hmm. And many people don't realize the schools are not picking up the costs for our events at their schools. We're paying the doctor, we're paying the officials, we're paying the site manager, we're paying the custodians, we're paying the security. So this year we ranged from a minus $348 at a parochial school game in the north to a plus of over $11,000 at the Ocean City mainland game. So that's what we're dealing with. If we had a tremendous rainstorm at Ocean City when that game was being played, we wouldn't have made that money and our revenue would have been down.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time here. I want to jump into basketball quickly. The new coaches' bench rule, they're now allowed to walk around. Has there been any problem?
Seems to be working out. The coaches, again, asked for this through our basketball committee, and it seems to be working out. Really, the biggest rule that we're stressing to all officials in all sports is the taunting, the showboating kind of rules that unfortunately we see so negatively in professional sports. It just doesn't have a place in high school sports, and we really try to work with the officials to enforce that.
Three-point line is becoming a big factor in high school basketball. Do you see maybe any changes down the line possibly?
Haven't heard much. Haven't heard much about that at all. It seems to have opened up the game, and it seems to, in fact, reduce the number of fouls with a lot of contact on the inside. So we haven't heard too many problems about it.
Baseball quickly, because I know you're a former baseball official. Anything on speed-up rules like the coaches tournament?
Yeah, in fact, it's interesting when you talk about the coaches tournament, the Diamond Classic. I umpired the first Diamond Classic and umpired many of them, and I love the rule. Just love the rule. We have been trying to convince the National Federation to move in our direction of speeding up the sport of baseball. We haven't been too successful. The batting box rule went in last year, which appeared to work well, but we still have some very, very long games. And we do not have the mercy rule in baseball such as we have in softball, primarily because the coaches don't want that rule.
Well, we got to whatever we could as quick as we can. One more segment to follow with Boyd Sands of the NJSIAA right after this. Welcome back to the Sports Card. Tad Kosneski with the director of the NJSIAA, Boyd Sands. Mr. Sands, any final thoughts before we leave today?
We'd just like to thank you for allowing us to come on your program and talk about our association. Many people have some different views of the organization because they don't recognize the fact that every county is represented on our committee by either a superintendent, a principal, or an athletic director. All the statewide organizations have representatives on our committee. We have parochial school representatives. We even have 2 state senators that sit on our committee. There's an officials representative, a coaches representative, and all of these people are primarily interested in high school sports in New Jersey.
Thanks for joining us, Mr.
Thank
Sands.
you.
We'll
Good.
see you next week on the Sports Card, next Saturday morning right here on ESPN2.